Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And we're getting pretty close to the end of Season 2 in The War Within. And this is where you're going to have to make the decision as to whether or not you really want to make the push for a Gladiator title. It's the best time to do it in this final stage because inflation will start to ramp up and getting rating will become easier. But obviously, picking a specialization can be difficult. Which one's going to be best suited to you? Which one's going to be best suited for the job? There's a lot of variables to consider. So I'm going to be breaking down all of those variables, the strengths and weaknesses, the advantages and disadvantages of any of the given specializations in the current balance string and tuning of Season 2 PvP. And as always, if you want to make sure that you are staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, educational and entertaining content, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. But let's get started here. We got a lot of specializations to talk about. Now, Affliction Warlock is probably one of the most challenging specializations to go for Gladiator right now. The main reason being that it lacks finishing power. It can be very difficult to close out a game. It's not very freely interchangeable either. I think for right now as an Affliction Warlock, maybe there's a couple of caster comps that you could try. But even those, you usually want a Demonology Warlock with Mortal Strike. So you don't have a lot of options. I think really only have like a Rogue is what you could play with, and maybe a Feral Druid. So you have very limited options. It doesn't provide strong burst damage, and it's decently flimsy. It's at the top of the first blood leaderboard as far as the first spec to go down. So for me, Affliction is probably pretty average or below average of a spec to pick for a player right now. Now, obviously, if you're the most advanced player, you've dedicated a lot of time to it, you've got friends that can fit the most optimal comp, you can obviously still make it work. But if you're coming into this from a pugging standpoint, or maybe moderate amount of experience, or just on the cusp of getting to Gladiator, I think it's going to be a lot more challenging. Arcane Mage is a little bit more interchangeable than Affliction Warlock. You can play with Windwalker Monks, you can play with Rogues, you can play with Feral Druids. I think for a lot of players, it's whether or not you want Frost or Arcane, and I think Frost is generally going to come out to be a little bit easier on average. But even Mage in general on the ladder, although it does really exceptionally well in tournaments, and even in tournaments we started to see a skew going more towards Elemental Shaman as time went on. I think that Mage is starting to lose a bit of momentum. It still has some of the best comps in the game, right, with Feral Mage and Rogue Mage. But if you don't have those options, you might feel a little bit more limited. I think that its power is still really strong, but it's more of an advanced spec. So if you're coming into this, you're definitely going to want to be more advanced if you're going to be taking the run with this one. But I think the prevalence of Hunters and Ellies, as it seems to be increasing, because Beastmaster and Marksman are both so strong, I think I might actually leave it kind of onto like the mid. I don't know if I can put it on the same tier as Affliction. I would have to drop this here and here if I was going to do this. Okay, well, we'll drop that like that. As far as the likelihood of going for Gladiator, what's your difficulty process? What's your LFG process going to look like? It's probably going to be a bit more rough. Arms Warrior is really strong right now, has a lot of comp options, particularly I think with Ret Warrior. That's kind of the go-to as far as Gladiator, and because it has like that go-to composition, you're probably gonna have an easy run with that if you can get into that team. But as far as other compositions, there's a couple of other cleaves. I think Demon Hunters are kind of taking your spot a little bit, is the only thing that I want to kind of note, is that Demon Hunters seem to be trending a bit upwards. So I'm going to leave Warrior at A tier as opposed to S, because I do think some other specializations are starting to take your thunder. But ironically, Thunder, actually Thunder Cleave is a really good option. Maybe I should leave it up there. We'll leave it here for now as far as likelihood of going for Gladiator. It's a strong option, has more options than these other two, but I think some other melee are starting to become a little bit more prevalent. Assassination Rogue, again, it's probably not as likely. It's similar to Affliction Warlock, just lacking kind of finishing power, a little bit difficult to get momentum. There's a lot of paladins that just completely counter you at the moment, and you're kind of fragile in terms of defense. So it's going to be rough in terms of going for Gladiator on this specialization. Boomkin, I think, is honestly a decent option. I think Boomkin Rogue, Boomkin Demon Hunter, these compositions, which have kind of been a staple for Boomkin for, I don't know, over a decade now, are in a decent spot. You're respectably durable. I actually do think that Boomkin can have a decent ride as far as getting to Gladiator in the current meta. Beast Mastery Hunter is really good. I'm kind of shoving this guy up straight up to the top. I also think that it's like remarkably easy to perform well on. Which is nice, especially with the set bonuses of this season, kind of automating a lot of your gameplay that now you can't even basically make any mistakes because your set bonus will just make up for it if you forgot to press Barb Shot a lot of the time. But Jungle Cleave, I think, is really good ladder comp at the moment. So Feral Beast Mastery Hunter or Marksman Beast Mastery Hunter. You can run Ret Paladin Beast Mastery Hunter, but I definitely think the Feral composition is a really good one. That is one that you would likely want to go for. Demonology Warlock, I'm going to slap up on A tier. So if you're a Warlock player, right, and you're thinking like what spec's the best one to go for Gladiator, I think right now it's Demonology. A lot of caster comps like Mage Demonology, Ellie Demonology, these double wizards are actually decently good at the moment with the durability buffs and the damage output that you currently have. Those would be the compositions that I would want to go for if I was a Warlock main and I really wanted to try and get Gladiator this season. Destruction Warlock, I think, is a little bit better than Affliction, and I think particularly the Rogue Deathstroke composition is an important one to run, similar to Arcane. Kind of just get carried by a Rogue if you're on this B tier at the moment as a caster, and because it's just got way more lethality than Affliction, but it still has fragility issues, which Demonology doesn't. And it's tough to get caster synergy because you don't have the Mortal Strike that Demo does. So Demo's tankiness and the Mortal Strike is the main reason it's kind of leading as far as Warlock specs at the moment. Devastation Evoker is a bit of a weird one because I don't really see it very often in 3v3, but I don't think that it's bad. I think that rogues can be incredibly difficult for it, but and maybe it's because it's composition with a Death Knight, that kind of classic Death Grip into AoE go type of play style. That comp is maybe not the most prevalent, although I think it could definitely be a strong Gladiator comp just because it's very straightforward if you want to run Frost, Death Knight, Devastation Evoker. But again, you're going to be limited to just that comp, and Dev Evoker is kind of limited in general. But I do kind of want to put it up on A tier. I think that it can be a decent run through for Gladiator. So like you want just very simple comps that kind of just either have like one main strategy you're doing the whole game, or you're just kind of blasting damage and trading defensives. Those are really good comps to go for Gladiator, generally speaking. As like an intermediate level player who's trying to break that Gladiator barrier for the first time. So I think Dev Evoker Frosty K can definitely accomplish that. Discipline Priest, again, with Healer, you want to consider like comp variety. I don't think that Disc has the most comp variety relative to a lot of other heroes like Holy Paladin at the moment, or Holy Priest or Resto Druid. Because of comp variety, I think that it comes in a little bit lower as far as healer selection in the current meta. Now, if you can jump onto one of those comps like FMP, RMP, you could still do well with it, but I think Holy is going to be a little bit more interchangeable and likely still a little bit more powerful in a lot of those setups at the moment. Ellie Shaman is an easy S tier slap. I feel like that you can just basically put this guy in with anything and it's really going to be working out well for you. You're tanky, instant cast, really good support for your team. Just really well rounded at the moment. If you're going to want to be going for Gladiator with this specialization, it's definitely a go-to. Whereas Enhancement, I'm kind of slapping you guys down here. Maybe we save that for one spec in particular. Enhance is probably going to be limited to playing with Windwalkers in the current meta, maybe Rogues and maybe Warriors a little bit. But it's going to be a lot harder to find a comp because a lot of those guys would prefer that you were a Feral. They'd prefer that you were a Ret. And you're kind of just in that kind of inferior role where they just prefer you or something else. So if you're going from LFG with this one, it's going to be a lot harder. Again, if you have your own team, your own friends, whatever, you're probably not even watching this tier list if you're in that boat. So, but it's going to be a lot harder if you're doing it through LFG. Feral Druid is a really good one. I do kind of want to slap it up on the S tier. We've seen it represented so much in the tournament level and as well as on the ladder. I think Jungle Cleave, Feral Ellie, right? Even Feral Shadow Priest. But maybe not so much at the moment. But Feral is really interchangeable, has a lot of power. It's a bit more complicated and nuanced to play, though. So like I was recommending between Feral and Red if you could pick any class. If you're starting from that ground up stage, though, it's going to probably take more than just 3 weeks at the end of the season if you're starting from ground zero, right? This is a little bit more addressed to players who might be at 2100 and they're trying to get over the intermediate level and get to Gladiator for the first time. It's kind of more focused as far as my discussion. So Fire Mage, Fire Mage feels like it's getting better. It feels like it's getting better, but I still wouldn't want to play it over Frost. I think just because you have Rogue Mage, you could obviously make it work. You probably could even run Feral Mage. I don't know about Demonology Fire either. I've seen a couple of, I think it's Ferrix that I was watching that was playing a lot of Fire recently, and maybe was trying to figure out how viable or not viable it is. But it's definitely increasing in viability, but I would say it's pretty risky. Higher risk option than just kind of going the Frost train, which for Frost, I kind of want to say that it's S tier, but I also think it might only be A tier on ladder because I think Hunters and Ellies and Ferals can make it actually very difficult for you. So I might actually slap you up here on A tier instead. Now you're a little bit more interchangeable again. Frost Demo, Frost RMP, Frost FMP. Bunch of comp options there, but I do think that this upper echelon is kind of like your main counter, and there's a lot of it. So I think it could be challenging at that Gladiator range. Frosty K, I'm going to put here on B tier for the melee. Remember, it's broken down into different categories, right? Ranged, melee, healer. Don't compare range to melee and healers to melee as far as difficulty of getting there, because it goes up top to bottom, left to right. But Frosty K, I think with a couple of specific melee cleaves like Demon Hunter or with Devastation Evoker, you can kind of cheese your way up the ladder. So don't underestimate Frosty K. I definitely think that it can give you a lot of options. Now, Fury Warrior, I feel like I see absolutely none of this as far as ladder. I don't think it's completely inviolable, but I definitely think it's not Arms Warrior at the moment. That's mostly just because of its ability to maintain its Mortal Strike relative to Arms. I think that also the burst damage from Arms can just be like remarkably high as opposed to Fury at the moment. So Fury, you'll likely struggle. Everyone will just be like, why aren't you Arms? That'll be the difficulty of trying to make a push as Fury at the moment. Demon Hunter is a really good option. Again, it's really interchangeable. Demon Hunter Ellie, Demon Hunter Boomkin. You can run almost anything that you want with this. Very well-rounded spec. I think it's kind of taking over Arms Warrior, likely because Rogues are starting to downturn because Paladins are upticking. So I definitely think Demon Hunter could be a great option. Really good interchangeability, great LFG experience with it likely. Holy Priest, I think, is a solid option. I'm not going to put it at the absolute top. Again, this one focuses a little bit more with probably wanting to play with like Feral Mage or Rogue Mage, those types of setups. I think that Holy Paladins are starting to take over in a lot of other regards. It's not going to be like a fantastic cleave healer. So if you got friends who play like multiple melee DPS, you might not want to go the Holy Priest route if you're going for Gladiator. But whereas Holy Paladin is just remarkable overall. You just can't run out of mana. Only downside is that you're maybe a little bit squishy and kind of susceptible to CC against mages in particular. But mages are kind of getting contained with this meta shift that I'm seeing with Ellies and Beast Mastery Hunters. You have Hallowed Ground, which is super OP for kiting and getting your team going as far as mobility. It's just absolutely broken bonker healer at the moment. And it's containing all the rogues that would typically make these specs struggle. So these specs are teaming up against the rogues and to counter the mages, and that's why you're seeing that kind of meta shift. Marksmanship Hunter. Do I think Marksmanship Hunter is better than Beast Mastery is now the question, because I feel like I don't want to slap like too many specs up onto S tier. Although, is it fair to have like 3 up there? I think Marks. I'm gonna put it on A tier for now. Put it a little bit lower. I think that it can be a little bit more directly countered with disarms and lockdown, and especially with team being more coordinated in 3v3 for Gladiator. I think that shutting a Marksmanship Hunter out can be a lot easier than Beastmaster, which is consistently hitting you. A lot harder, more difficult to set up basically for marksmanship. But they're both really close. I think that you could go either route. They're both going to be fighting for the same comps, right? Jungle Cleave, Feral, Hunter Rogue, those types of compositions. Mistweaver seems to be getting a lot better, a lot more popular. Fistweaver's been really good at getting into dot classes. This kind of hybrid build with the ranged kick has been really good. I definitely think Mistweaver it's like a meta shift even without class balance changes. It's becoming a lot more viable. I'm going to put it up on A tier. I think Holy Paladin is likely, I would say, the best healer just period overall, given all of its tools, its mana, efficiency, everything considered. I think that Holy Paladin is just number 1 at the moment. And interchangeability, whereas Mistweaver probably has some hard counters that Paladin might not be experiencing. Outlaw Rogue is probably just flat out avoid. Salty Rogue's going to be a way easier run. Assassination, maybe there's like some niche comps like Affliction Assassination that you could maybe play at the moment. But if you wanted like the best odds, best chances, right? Absolutely min-maxing. Difference might be small between these, but even a small difference can make a big difference for you if you're just like the first time and you're just like 50 rating away from it. But you're probably going to want to avoid it. I think Subtlety is just the better option overall for it. Preservation Evoker, probably also one that's going to be very difficult. It's very susceptible to CC, very easy to control in rank 3s. Is it this bad? I think I'm going to leave it here just because of how susceptible it is due to its minimum range at the moment and the healing output not being as remarkable, although its damage output can be really sick. And it can be maybe a bit of a cheese healer if you manage to get like some type of melee cleave to play with it. You kind of just run in and zerg people over. But I think these healers are going to feel a lot more consistent, a lot less shaky in a lot more situations. Restoration Shaman, also not... Some people are saying like, I just played my Restoration Shaman to top 10 in solo shuffle last night. I don't even know how because I haven't played it in like 4 months. And I wasn't playing the Totemic Cheese build either. I was playing Farseer. And like it felt like it was just absolute hell to keep people alive. I think that's in my VOD from yesterday on my live stream section here on YouTube. Like towards the end of it, like healing was just like, what is going on? This is so impossible. I really want to say that Resto Shaman is not like remarkable. I kind of want to put it like above Prez, but I think it's going to be an absolute struggle bus. Resto Druid is a really good option though, to go for at the moment. Honestly, I kind of want to bump Prez up just because I feel like the difference is so massive, but I'm going to leave both Shaman and Prez down there. Resto Druid is really good. Just solid output across the board. Has a lot of comp variety. Can play caster comps, can play melee cleaves, can play melee ranged. So it's got a lot of interchangeability, unlike Mistweaver or Holy Priest. So important to take that into account if you're going to be in LFG at all. Ret Paladin, I think I'm going to put on A tier for Gladiator. I think it's a little bit easier to control than in a solo shuffle or Battleground Blitz. A little bit easier to counter, a little bit easier to control, but still really good and well-rounded. Ret Warrior is obviously going to be kind of your main go-to, or Ret Hunter as your main go-tos, but definitely not completely inviolable. But as far as 3v3 is concerned, I think these guys are starting to outshine as far as overall performance. Shadow Priest is another one that I think is also still really good. I definitely think it's like in here with Frost Mage. It's in here with these guys easily. If not Boomkin, it might be a little bit lower, but really tanky. Has a lot of interchangeability. Can play Demo Shadow for double caster. Can play melee ranged, right, with the Ferals, with the Rogues. Maybe even Demon Hunter, although I don't really see it very often, if ever. But I think the Feral Shadow Priest comp can be a really good ladder comp if you're a Shadow Priest right now. They're probably your best odds of getting high rated. Subtlety Rogue. Oh, this is now we're getting into some of the nitty gritties, some of the difficult ones, because Subtlety Rogue is basically you're playing RMP, right? For the most part. Maybe you could slap in Ellie Rogue a little bit here or there with this. I should honestly try some 3v3 on my Rogue. I just completed the 2400 Soul Shuffle challenge on it. I should give like some rank 3s a go on it. But from my experience of watching other people play it, I think it's definitely deserving of S, or very close to S. I'm going to put it on S tier. Paladin comps can be difficult, but I think the control that you get, the power that you get with RMP, like Holy, Sub, Frost, I just looked at the wrong icons there while I was looking at them, but Sub, Holy, and Frost, really good option as far as the composition. But if you don't have that, you might want to avoid it. Again, it's not as interchangeable, so maybe that's a reason to put it here. I don't know. Its power is so high that I'm leaving it here. I'm leaving it there just because of its power. Survival Hunter, again, you're just not a BM Hunter. You're not Marks. You have a lot of liabilities. It's not that you're not inviolable, though. I think you could have a couple of comps. I might end up making my Gladiator comp actually being Boomkin Survival Hunter, just because those are the classes my friends play, but maybe not the one I would recommend for either of those independently. As far as comps, Survival Hunter is definitely better than Frost and Fury, though, so it's got to be coming up here, I think, at least, with Arms and Ret. But its comp variety is going to be more limited than Arms, for sure, as far as interchangeability, and a lot of people will probably just prefer if you're BM or Marksman. Unholy DK, I think it's probably just going to feel kind of mid. I think Frost is probably better for an intermediate player who's just coming out to the Gladiator rank for the first time, because it's a little bit more bursty. You can kind of cheese wins, whereas Unholy is going to be a lot more dampening games, require more. You're not going to be able to make as many mistakes and be able to come out ahead, but maybe not absolutely terrible as far as going for Gladiator. And then we got Windwalker Monk. Bro, I have so many specs on S tier. Just shows honestly how good the balance is. Like, I think Shuffle is more balanced than ranked 3s. Ranked 3s when you can actually like play coordinated add-ons and track everything. A lot of like the small imbalances of like defensive cooldowns becomes more noticeable, more apparent. I think Windwalker is honestly better than Ret. Is it that much better? Maybe it's not that much better. Maybe we could slap it in here onto A tier. I think that might be an okay, acceptable location for it. Again, Windwalker Ellie, really good composition option. Windwalker Mage, really good composition option for the ladder right now. But I think you can get CC'd out a little bit too hard, which could be difficult for the ladder. And also Ret Paladins might be a little bit annoying for you in some cases, but definitely a really good pick overall. Augmentation Evoker, I basically never see it, but I'd imagine that it's at least like... what did I just drag? Where did I put you, a little Augie boy? You're probably somewhere in here at least, if not higher. I think Aug melee could actually be really good at the moment. It's going to provide a lot of just like burst one-shot damage up front, give you a lot of edge there as far as surprise factors. But I'd say if you're like an LFG player, probably Ellie or Demon Hunter are going to be kind of like your go-tos because they're just most interchangeable. They can play with the most different classes. If you have the best comps in the game, right? RMP, never going to go wrong with that. Ellie Farrell, you're never going to go wrong with that. Ret Warrior, you're never going to go wrong with that. So there's a couple of those like one-trick comps that you can go for to get Gladiator. And then every spec pretty much has like maybe a comp that could go the distance with it. But if you're pugging a lot, you're probably going to want to focus on like those two at the top or a Holy Paladin. To be able to find your teammates more efficiently and more effectively. So I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. Hope it helps you out on your push for Gladiator. I wish you guys the best. Thank you guys very much for supporting the channel as always, and I will see you in the next one.